Welcome back, listeners, to By the Pages. We're so glad you've joined us once again for another deep dive.
Another deep dive.
Into another fascinating piece of writing.
That's right.
This time, we're starting off with a really thought-provoking line. I think, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under the heavens. Now, that's from the book of Ecclesiastes, and that's exactly where we're heading today.
Oh, Ecclesiastes. Yeah,
Yeah.
Ecclesiastes is one of those books that can really make you stop and think. It's considered part of the wisdom literature of the Bible. But there's this distinct, almost cynical voice that pops up throughout. It's really interesting.
Right. It doesn't try to sweeten anything up. It just lays it all out there.
Yeah.
And we meet this intriguing figure called Kohelet. Often it's translated as the
Like
teacher.
a teacher.
Some scholars believe it's King Solomon, but others aren't quite so sure.
Right.
Whoever this Kohelet is, he's grappling with some seriously big questions about the meaning of life.
Definitely. And right at the heart of it all is this Hebrew word, hevel. Yeah. It's often translated as vanity or meaningless or sometimes fleeting. But to be honest, hevel, it's a much deeper concept than any single English word can truly capture.
It's like he's saying, look, I've gone after everything the world tells us we should value: wealth, power, pleasure, and you know what? It's all hevel.
Exactly. It's not necessarily that these things are bad in and of themselves. But at the end of the day, they just don't satisfy you. When you look at the bigger picture, time keeps marching on, death comes to us all, and whatever we've accomplished, it just fades away.
Like whispers in the wind.
Yeah, like whispers in the wind, exactly.
There's that incredibly vivid image in Ecclesiastes, the sun rising and setting over and over, the rivers flowing into the sea. It's this endless cycle, and we're just tiny specks in this vast universe. It's humbling and a little frightening at the same time.
Absolutely. The teacher doesn't shy away from that feeling of fear. In fact, he kind of leans into it. He explores the idea that even our best efforts to find meaning or purpose, it can feel like you're chasing after the wind.
So, is he saying we should just give up, resign ourselves to a meaningless existence? Because that's a pretty bleak outlook.
Not exactly. This is where things start to get really interesting. He actually suggests that accepting this hevel, this lack of control, that might be the key to finding a different kind of meaning.
It's like he's saying, okay, we can't control everything, we're not going to live forever, but that doesn't mean we can't enjoy the ride.
That's a great way to put it. He points to the simple pleasures in life as a source of genuine joy, friendship, a good meal, a beautiful sunset. These things might be fleeting too, but they offer us a taste of something real and meaningful.
But how does that fit with the whole fearing God thing? That's a big part of Ecclesiastes too, right?
Right. It's all about perspective. The teacher dives into the idea that even wisdom, something we usually think of as a good thing, it has its limitations.
So you're saying that trying to be a good person, following the rules, it doesn't necessarily guarantee a happy or easy life.
That's the paradox. He seems to be saying that true wisdom lies in recognizing our limitations, accepting what we can't control, and ultimately putting our trust in something bigger than ourselves.
And for the teacher, that something bigger is God. But it's not about blind faith or ignoring the difficulties of life. It's about holding on to those realities along with the belief that there's a divine order to things.
Precisely. It's a delicate balance. And it's important to remember that we're hearing most of this from the teacher's point of view. There's also this anonymous author who frames the book and provides a kind of final interpretation.
So we've got this inner voice, the teacher, wrestling with life's big questions, and then this outer voice, the author, offering a different angle.
You could see it that way, and this interplay between the two voices. That's what makes Ecclesiastes so captivating. It's like we're eavesdropping on a conversation about faith and doubt, wisdom and despair, and in the end, finding a way to live with both.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got this teacher who's trying to figure out the meaning of life in a world where everything feels temporary and beyond our control. And he's suggesting that maybe the answer is in letting go of that need for control and finding joy in the simple things. But then we have this author who's putting all of that within a bigger framework of faith and divine purpose.
You got it. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There are so many layers to peel back in this book.
Well, let's start peeling those layers back. Where should we dive in first?
I think we should go back to the teacher's exploration of those worldly pursuits. He doesn't just talk about wealth and pleasure. He actually immerses himself in those experiences to see if they live up to the hype.
Like he's running experiments.
Yeah.
Testing out these supposed good things to see if they hold up under scrutiny.
Exactly, like with wealth. In Ecclesiastes chapter 2, he talks about accumulating vast riches, building houses, indulging in every luxury you can imagine. And what's his conclusion? vanity and vexation of spirit.
It's that feeling when you get something you've always wanted, but then it doesn't actually make you happy.
Yeah.
The excitement fades and you're just left feeling empty.
Yeah, it's like a letdown. He even points out how wealth can actually lead to isolation and anxiety. He says, "He that loveth silver shall not be satisfied with silver, nor he that loveth abundance with increase." This is also vanity. It's like this never-ending cycle of wanting more and never being content.
And it's not just about wealth. He does the same thing with pleasure. Throws these extravagant parties, surrounds himself with beautiful objects, enjoys every kind of entertainment.
And what does he find? It's all fleeting, the enjoyment disappears, and you're left with this sense of emptiness. There's even a point where he says, "I hated life, because the work that is wrought under the sun is grievous unto me, for all is vanity and vexation of spirit."
Pretty grim, right? Yeah. It's dark. But I'm struck by his honesty. He's not afraid to admit that he's tried everything and nothing has truly satisfied him. It's like he's saying, don't just take my word for it. Go ahead, try these things for yourself. But don't be surprised if you end up feeling the same way.
And that's what makes Ecclesiastes so relatable. Even after all these centuries, we've all had those moments where we chase after something only to realize it doesn't deliver what we expected.
Right. It's like a universal experience.
Yeah.
But the teacher doesn't stop there. He goes on to explore wisdom and knowledge, things that are generally considered positive pursuits.
That's right. And initially, he seems to find some fulfillment in wisdom. He says, "Wisdom excelleth folly as far as light excelleth darkness."
But then he runs into a roadblock. He realizes that even wisdom has its limitations.
It's like the more you know, the more you realize how much you don't know. It can be a very humbling experience.
He even suggests that wisdom can lead to sorrow because it gives you a deeper understanding of all the injustice and complexity in the world. It's like ignorance is bliss. Once you see the problems, you can't unsee them.
Absolutely. He's not saying wisdom is bad, but he's warning us not to expect it to solve all of life's problems or guarantee happiness.
So where does that leave us? If even wisdom has limits, what's next?
That's where the author's framing of the teacher's words becomes really important. He seems to be suggesting, okay, life is full of hevel, but that doesn't mean it's pointless. There's a bigger picture, a divine plan that we may not fully understand.
So it's like he's acknowledging the teacher's struggles, but offering a different perspective through which to view them. Maybe a perspective of faith.
I think that's a good way to look at it. The author reminds us that we're not just random beings drifting through a meaningless existence. We were created with a purpose. And that purpose is ultimately to fear God and keep his commandments.
Fearing God. That sounds a bit intimidating. What does that actually mean in a practical sense?
It's not about being terrified of God. It's more about having a deep reverence for him, recognizing his sovereignty and authority. It's about acknowledging that we're not in control. There's a higher power at work.
Right.
And that our ultimate fulfillment comes from aligning ourselves with his will.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
So it's about recognizing a power greater than ourselves. But how do we know what his will is? Especially in a world with so many different interpretations and beliefs.
That's where the author's emphasis on keeping God's commandments comes into play. It's about living with integrity, following those moral and ethical principles that are laid out in Scripture.
So it's about living a life that reflects those values.
Exactly. And it's not just about blindly following rules.
Yeah.
It's about developing a deep relationship with God, seeking his wisdom and guidance, and trying to live in a way that honors him.
Okay, so we see the author pulling together the different threads of the teacher's exploration. He's saying, look, I get your frustrations. I see the fleeting nature of it all. But there's another side to this coin.
He's proposing that true freedom doesn't come from trying to control everything. It comes from surrendering to something greater than ourselves.
So it's about striking a balance, accepting what we can't change, and striving to live a life filled with meaning and purpose within this framework of faith.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the tension, that tension between our human desire for control and the reality of God's sovereignty. It's about embracing the paradox and finding a way to live with both.
That makes sense. But it's still complex.
Yeah,
How can we even begin to apply these ideas to our own lives?
that's a great question. And it's something we're going to delve into further as we explore some key passages and imagery that bring these ideas to life.
Okay, I'm ready to dive in. Where should we start? So we talked about the teacher's journey, through wealth, pleasure, even wisdom, and how it all comes back to this idea of hevel.
Right. And we've touched on the author's point of view, how he kind of frames these experiences within this broader idea of faith and a divine purpose.
Right. But there's so much depth in the language of Ecclesiastes. Are there any specific passages that you find especially powerful, passages that really capture these concepts?
Definitely. The poem in Ecclesiastes 1.3:11, it's where the teacher reflects on that cyclical nature of life. It's really powerful.
It's where he talks about that image of the sun rising and setting, the wind blowing, the rivers flowing to the sea, and then the whole cycle starts all over again.
Right. He uses these images to paint a picture of this constant repetition, this feeling that everything just keeps happening again and again, but we're all just passing through.
And in the middle of all that, he asks this really profound question. What profit hath a man of all his labor which he taketh under the sun?
Yeah. It's like he's asking, what's the point of all our hard work and accomplishments if it's all just going to disappear eventually?
It's a question that can make you feel pretty insignificant,
Yeah.
especially when you think about the vastness of time and the universe.
But I don't think the point is to make us feel small. I think it's more about challenging our perspective, making us question what we're really chasing in life.
So it's not about giving up on our goals or ambitions, but about choosing them carefully, recognizing that some things have more lasting value than others.
Exactly. And that brings us back to the author's emphasis on fearing God and keeping his commandments. It's about finding a purpose that goes beyond our limited time here.
Because if we're only living for ourselves, for our own achievements and pleasures, then it's easy to fall into that trap of hevel chasing things that ultimately leave us empty.
Right. But if we're living for something bigger, a purpose that aligns with God's will, then our actions have a whole different meaning.
It's like our lives become part of a bigger story, a story that continues even after we're gone.
Exactly. And that's where we find true meaning and fulfillment, not in what we accumulate or the recognition we receive, but in living a life that's in harmony with our Creator.
That's a really powerful message, especially in a world that often tells us that we're only as valuable as what we achieve or what we own.
Yeah. It challenges us to think differently about success, to find joy in the simple things, and to live with gratitude for the gift of life.
So even though Ecclesiastes can be pretty heavy at times, with all this talk about futility and the fleeting nature of life, ultimately it's a book about hope.
It really is. It's about finding hope in the midst of uncertainty, finding joy in the midst of sorrow, and finding purpose in a world that can often feel meaningless.
It's about embracing the paradox, accepting what we can't control, and finding freedom in surrender.
And it's about trusting that even though we might not understand all of God's ways, He has a plan for us, a plan that's far greater than we can comprehend.
This has been such a fascinating and thought-provoking exploration of Ecclesiastes. It's one of those books that sticks with you long after you finish reading it.
Absolutely. It challenges us, it comforts us, and ultimately it guides us towards a deeper understanding of what it means to live a truly meaningful life.
It's a reminder that even though our time here is limited, our actions have an impact that lasts forever.
Thank you for joining us on this journey through Ecclesiastes.
If you enjoyed this deep dive, please like, share, and subscribe to By the Pages. We'll see you next time.